So we have seen like how the different scriptures they emerged from the Vedic period, starting with the Veda Samhitas, which are the actual realizations of the seers and sages. Then we have their interpretative texts like Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads. Then auxiliary texts like Vedangas, which are helpful in understanding the Vedic literature. So then, along with that, developed many philosophical texts. So the scriptures belonging to the 6 different schools of philosophy, Nyaya, Mimamsa, Vaisheshika, others. And then we have seen the development of the epic literature, the Itihasas and the Puranas. And then these scriptures became inspiration to the later people in creating a whole gamut of classical literature in various branches of knowledge, and especially in the classical age starting from the 1st century AD for at least 1000 years or 1200 years up to 12th century. We see a galaxy of poets, philosophers, scientists belonging to various branches of knowledge. They brought out different kinds of literature. And of course, it was during this age that we had the greatest poets, not just in like Sanskrit. Of course, Sanskrit was excelling, but in other Indian languages also which existed, like Tamil. So we have many beautiful literature in those languages. But when we say the Indian literature, the classical literature, we need to concentrate not just, gather information not just about the classical Sanskrit poets, but the poets in other languages also who equally contributed. The thought contents are very rich. Whatever the language may be, the thought contents were very rich. And at the foundation, as I had explained in the first day, that whether Panini was writing a technical text or Nagarjuna was writing a technical text like Rasayana Shastra or chemistry, or Aryabhatta was giving us astrological text, mathematical text. So everywhere the foundation, the one thing which continued as the basis of all these things or was kept behind is the spiritual depth, the spiritual realizations. So these great ages of Vedas, Upanishads, Ramayana, Mahabharata, you can see that how these highest realizations is percolating into the mass. So mostly the later literature, they were very popular among the masses than the Vedas and Upanishads or the highest scriptures, the revealed scriptures, which were confined to only sadhaks, seekers. So the rest of the people, they were introduced to the same knowledge through different kinds of literature. So we have a lot of creative writings. So that's what Sri Aurobindo says. For centuries, India profusely kept creating all kinds of literature. So if one looks at the whole history of Sanskrit literature or the whatever is available in the form of Sanskrit, there's no end to it. Thousands and thousands of manuscripts are still lying in the manuscript libraries. They are not yet, published. Many things which are there, the whole knowledge, we don't know how many things are still there yet to be discovered, yet to be known. And many of the manuscripts were lost, stolen. Maximum number of manuscripts, the wealth of manuscripts that we see today in India, greater number of those manuscripts are there in outside India. In the India Office Library, London, has got maximum number of manuscripts. So in India also there are lakhs and lakhs of manuscripts which are catalogued, digitized, but not yet brought into the surface. There are many manuscripts which are not yet even catalogued. They're lying in the secret libraries. Many people have kept it and not bringing it out. So, and the damage which were done to those whole wealth of knowledge. For example, you take Alexander. When he came, In Kashmir, there was a Saraswati Mahal library, Saraswati library. So the amount of manuscripts which this library contained, they were all stolen, burnt, and misused by Alexander. His people, the army that he carried, so they used to cook their food by burning the manuscripts. And when they had to cross any river or small lanes, so they used that from this end to the other end and then walked over that and then caught it. This is how the manuscripts, because they didn't understand what are these things. And when they understood the importance of certain things, they carried it along with them. Similarly, the Nalanda University, which flourished from 8th to 12th century or 7th to 12th century. So for 400-500 years, it was the best learning center in the whole world. When the whole world had no idea or concept of university, this had the biggest university, 52 departments running and acharyas and many. It was international. Many people came from abroad also to learn there. But there was thorough screening of the students. 8th to 12th century. So now this Nalanda premise had 3 important libraries containing manuscripts, and people from all over world came to copy the manuscripts, especially from the Southeast Asian region. So that is why the Southeast Asian countries have got a lot cultural contact, the cultural elements, Indian cultural elements, the names, the books, the culture, way of life, the rituals, everything has a lot of Indian cultural impact. So they used to come, copy it, take it, translate it into various languages. The manuscripts were translated into, most of the scientific texts were translated into Persian language, and through Persian, then Arabic language, and then through that it went to the Europe and then came to English. Then on this side, the Chinese and Tibetan people played maximum role translating the manuscripts into Chinese and Tibetan languages. So now, there are situations when you have many contents available in Chinese or Tibetan, further translated into English, but the original manuscript is missing. There are plenty of books like this. And it's mentioned that it's from a Hindu manuscript. But the original manuscript in Sanskrit is not there, it's missing. But the Chinese and English or Tibetan and English translation is available. So the damage which has been done to the wealth of knowledge, like especially in Nalanda, when it was set into fire by Bakhtiyar Khilji. So the manuscript libraries kept burning for 6 months. There was no way. Everything was locked from outside and it was set fire. And when all these students and teachers, they were taking their food. So the discovery says there were burnt dishes and burnt grains and all these things were discovered later. So everyone had to run away, so many deaths. So whoever escaped with certain manuscripts or whatever possessions they had. But the libraries, what it contained, it all got burnt. So that's how the wealth of manuscripts is gone. So whatever is left and whatever is published with us, when we enter into that realm, we find, whole gamut of prose, poetry, scientific documents, drama, all kinds of. The amount of, the style of compositions that you see in Sanskrit. No other language, even the whole humanity has to yet understand and discover and apply it to their languages. This style of composition, various styles, thousands and thousands, various ways of expressing the ideas and playing with the words and the meanings. We have seen some of the examples on the first day, those difficult kinds of compositions. But these are just fraction, 1 or 2 things. But there are hundreds of ways of like that. There is something called Kamadhenu style of composition. Kamadhenu style of composition means like one poet writes one verse, say using say 30 different characters. And using the same 30 different characters, he creates another 1000 verses. That means the first verse lists out all the characters which the poet is going to use in the next 1000 verses. He limits himself, he confines himself to those 30 characters and writes 1000 verses, 20,000 verses. So this is called Kamadhenu, as if, like the first verse is Kamadhenu. One doesn't find those kind of compositions anywhere else. Most amazing feats which are, available in this the literature, in printed form, in not printed form, in manuscript form. This is what makes the whole classical era as the best era in the field of literature, in the field of creative writings by the Indian poets, classical poets. So when we come to this whole galaxy of literature, the different kinds of literature, what comes to the forefront was the contributions of few of the most important poets, dramatists, or the prose writers like Kalidas, Bhartrihari, Magha, Bharavi, Sriharsha, Dandin, Jayadeva, Bhasa, Vishakhadatta, plenty. But these are some of the important characters. And it is said that among all these poets, Kalidas was at the top. Why? Now see, when we look at the language point of view, every language has a simple form of it and a difficult form of it. Every language, invariably. Whether we speak of our own mother tongues or foreign languages, it has a simple form and it has a difficult form. So now, the poets who have become truly popular, whose poetry has touched to the hearts of people, their language is simple. The language is simple and spontaneous. In Sanskrit, we call it Sarala Sahaja Bhasha. Sarala means simple, Sahaja means spontaneous. For example, like Tulsidas, why he became so popular? Why his writing has that magnetic, power to attract? Because the language is simple and spontaneous and mantric in its nature. So it attracts, it touches. Similarly, we have, in Odia, we have very popular writing. I mean, everyone invariably can understand it and then it touches the heart, is the Bhagavatam by one Jagannath Das. He has incorporated many verses from the Gita, from the Mahabharata, from Puranas, from Bhagavatam into his Bhagavata, narrating the story of Krishna's Leela. But the language and those verses are translated directly, the poetic translation, such beautifully that sometimes, like when I write articles on what should be the, the principles of translation, I take examples from Bhagavatam. It's in Odia. Only Odia people can understand what I say. For Odia people, I write like how to translate texts. So examples, plenty of examples one can draw from that. So similarly, Kalidas was one of the poets who, was the greatest among all poets because he knew every emotion of human beings. Every emotion of human beings. Every human emotion, you can say. Like the question arises in you and you'll find that Kalidas is answering to that question next. This is how one finds while reading Kalidas. So Bhasa was one of the dramatists, early dramatist. His writings are considered to be the first of the classical examples. So if Kalidas is the finest example of the classical poetry, which is simple and spontaneous and emotive and at the same time carrying the intensity of the thought content, intensity of the rhythm, intensity of the soul value, poetic value. So the same way Bhasa, who is considered to be the earliest. His dramas, he has written 13 plays. He was basically a playwright. So till 19th century, beginning of the 19th century, no one knew about Bhasa. Just he was known by name, but his writings were neither present in the oral tradition, nor anyone knew the existence of any manuscript which contained his writings. So in the beginning of 19th century in Kerala, there was one T. Ganapati Shastri, so who discovered in one of the libraries all the 13 plays of Bhasa. And these 13 plays, the stories are taken mostly from the Mahabharata. The characters are taken from the Mahabharata. The stories are taken. And there are many social elements also. So in his drama, one not just gets insights into various characters and events in the Mahabharata, but also knows what was the social, religious, cultural values of that time, and how Sanskrit was such a spoken language existing in the mass. So the 13 different dramas which he wrote, there are many imaginative dramas also there, historical drama, social drama, mythological drama. So all these were discovered in early 19th century by T. Ganapati Shastri. So Swapna Vasava Dattam is a very popular play of Bhasa. Pratigna Yogandharayana is another writing. Pancharatra is another writing. Pratima Nataka is another writing. Abhisheka Nataka is another writing. Balacharita, Duta Kavya, Karnabhara, Duta Ghatutkacha, Charudatta, Madhyama Vyayoga, Avimaraka, Urubhanga. These are the 13 plays. Now, it's just like passingly I want to mention about it that in 2016 we have formed this Vande Mataram Library Trust, whose vision and mission is to recover most of the important texts in classical Sanskrit and offer the authentic translation and preservation of manuscripts and all these things. So one task we have taken up is to translate into English and make it available to the students of various universities, all these 13 dramas, plays of Bhasa. The first book which is published by Vande Mataram Library as its first publication is one of the dramas of Bhasa, Madhyama Vyayoga. The book is now available for public. And slowly over a period of who translated it? One Priyamvada, who lives in USA. So she has taken up the task. She has volunteered, in fact. So she will be translating all the 13 plays and from Sanskrit to English. And it's a different way of presenting also. So then a layman or student can understand these difficult classical texts. Now, when we come to the content, why do we need to bring this into a workshop of this nature where we are discussing about the scriptures, the deeper spiritual values and all these things? So the point is, some of the examples when we look at, even though it is a social drama or a historical drama, as I told you, they present the human difficulties, human emotions, and try to elevate the human consciousness through poetry, through different descriptions, and something very practical which one keeps experiencing in day-to-day life. They deal with the day-to-day events. At the same time, bring some of the values which can inspire others, which can help others in their upliftment. So they speak about the human destiny, they speak about the human karma, they speak about the cultural values, they speak of the social status of many social values, they speak of the shastras, their deeper realizations, and then bring in a lot of scientific elements into their poetry. So because they were great scientists, when they speak about, say, astronomy, astrology, and many scientific elements, and they speak about the nature which was the guru. So now I'll give some examples from some practical examples which are known as subhashitas. Of course, we will be doing a few subhashita today in our sessions. Natya Shastra is composed by Bharata Muni. It is the grammar of poetry, the grammar of drama, the how does one create a play, and what is like the Natya Mancha. Anything about dramatics is presented there, and poetry, the grammar of poetry and the grammar of plays. Natya Shastra, yes, Natya Shastra. It offers many, like deeper understanding of the science of all these things. Bhasa was first century AD. A little before maybe or little later, but belonging to. So far we don't have any record. Bhartrhari, place. Oh, place. This is like in Ujjain. When you go to Ujjain, so there is a Bhartrhari cave where he sat and meditated and wrote most of his writings. Nrit and not. See, natati. Natati means enacting. Not. From not you get natya. From nrit you get nritya. Okay. This also has the base root in the sound nru, from which you get nara and nari. So both nara and nari, they can make each other dance. एक दूसरे को कैसे नचाएंगे वो कला तो मालूम है सबको. No, he wrote in Sanskrit. Nothing is known about his life or anything. So considered to be a South Indian poet, but nothing much is known about Bhasa. So he's just his dramas are discovered and recovered, and Sri Aurobindo, while like commenting on Sanskrit literature, so he comments on the language and style and the thought content of Bhasa, and he says there is a fine vigor in Bhasa's writings and presentations. It's vigorous, finely vigorous. The language, presentation, thought content, etc. So some of the examples, some practical examples, simple examples we will see from Bhasa, where again, like this example, it brings out again this Vedic principle of to grow by giving. He says in one of the dramas, Shiksha Kshayam Gacchati Kala Paryayat. All our learning, if we don't put much effort into preserving that, it is said that anabhyase visham vidya. If there is no abhyas, any kind of learning, it will perish. So shiksha kshayam gacchati, all our learning one day perishes. Kala paryayat, over a period of time. Subadha mula nipatanti padava. However strong the trees and plants may be, the roots may be, but there is always a possibility that it will fall. It will be uprooted. There are conditions in which all these will be uprooted. Jalam jalasthanagatam cha sushyati. There is a possibility that all the oceans may dry up. All the waters will. So for everything, there is an end. What doesn't perish? He says, Hutam cha dattam cha tatheva tishtati. But the result, the vibration of giving and offering, whatever is offered and whatever is given with purity, so that remains forever. So the message here he gives that everyone, every human being should develop this quality of like offering oneself, giving oneself, opening oneself. And here giving also means the dana. All those who do not give, later, Bhartrhari gives a very beautiful example through his poetry. He says that danam bhoga nasa tisro gatayo bhavanti vittasya. All that we earn, the material wealth, it has got three ways, three paths. Three things to be done with this. Danam, either you give bhoga, or you enjoy, or nasa, or it perishes. Either it is enjoyed, or it is given for enjoyment, or it vanishes. So Bhartrihari says, Yona dadati na bhunkte. The one who doesn't give, neither he enjoys, tasya trutiyagatir bhavati. He says he follows the third path, which is nasa. So either you enjoy or you give. And another example, Bhasa says, akaranam rupam, akaranam kulam, mahatsu nicheshu cha karma shobhate. Akaranam rupam. One is very handsome, very beautiful to look at. But rupa is akarana, is of no use. Akaranam kulam, one comes from a noble family, high family, but it's of no use. Whether one is mahat, mahan, great, or lowly, comes from a low family or a high family. What decides whether someone is really great or not great is the karma. Mahatsu nicheshu cha karma shobhate. It is the karma which decides whether someone is great or not great. Akaranam rupam, akaranam kulam, mahatsu nicheshu cha karma shobhate. There's one situation in one of the dramas, especially when he is Charudatta is a character in one of the dramas. He was a very rich person. In the drama, he is described as a rich person, and suddenly, because of his karma, bad karma, he loses all his property. Then he realizes, and he says a very practical thing. He says that suppose someone is suffering too much, goes through a financial crisis and suffering, experiencing poverty, and then he, rises. Now it's a period for him to enjoy. So that gives him maximum happiness. As this is true, that after experiencing the pain, when someone experiences the pleasure, where the experience of pleasure is maximum, the same way, if someone after experiencing so much of pleasure suddenly loses everything, for him the experience of pain is 100 times greater. So he expresses that through this beautiful poetry. He says, Sukham hi dukkhani anubhuya shobhate. The Sukham has the real meaning when it is experienced after experiencing the dukkha. Yatha andhakaradiva deepa darshanam. As in the whole darkness, when he was searching for light and gets a glimpse of a flame, Sukhattu yo yati dasam daridratam. And from Sukha, when one goes down, loses everything and enters into the daridrata, experiences poverty. So it says, Sthitah sharirena mrutah sa jivati. Even though he is living bodily, physically, but he is dead inside. Sthitah sharirena mrutah sa jivati. So that is death for him. So now death is a concept which is described in various shastras in various ways. And especially Krishna in the Mahabharata, he gives a description of many kinds of deaths. One of the examples I'll give you, like here is one example. Even though physically someone is living, he is dead. So there is a political death, there is an economic death, there is a literary death. The death can happen so many times while living here. It's not just the departure from the body which is death. So on one occasion, there was a dilemma, because in the Mahabharata is such a text that it offers many kinds of complex issues, human issues. If someone really wants to go deep to find out the human psychology and the deeper issues related with human psychology, Mahabharata is the best scripture to collect examples. Dilemma. So many dilemmas, so many occasions one finds this or that. Because that is why it is always a text between the challenges between dharma and adharma, duty and no duty, what is to be done, what is not to be done. And there on one occasion, Arjuna, he is facing this dilemma, what to do. The occasion is that Arjuna had taken a vow that he would kill the person who insults his weapon, Gandiva. His weapon, his bow, is known as Gandiva. So if anyone insults his Gandiva, he will kill him. That was the vow he had taken. Now there a situation comes when Yudhishthira, his elder brother, the king, is insulting Gandiva. He is scolding Arjuna, and in that he is saying that your Gandiva is useless and all these things. Now here is a dilemma. Now what Arjuna will do? Should he kill or not kill Yudhishthira? Because if he kills, he is killing his elder brother, he is killing the king of the kingdom. That's not right on his part. And if he doesn't kill, he is untrue to his words, which is very serious. For a Kshatriya, his promise, his words are, like he has given the word, he has given. That's all. So now, Krishna was fortunately present. So Krishna said, I know that you people always, do something like this, all kinds of promises, and then you can't fulfill it. They call Krishna what to do. So he comes to their help. Now, before Kurukshetra. So now what is the solution to this problem? And Mahabharata is plenty of such issues. So that is why reading the Mahabharata carefully, in its depth, gives a deeper and clear understanding of what is dharma and what is adharma. It is the text where dharma and adharma, these issues are clearly explained in practical terms, because the situations are created. Now Krishna says, look Arjuna, yes, you have taken a vow, fine. Now why do you think that killing means just beheading the person? So he explains him what is meant by death. So he says, like I said, there is economic death. While being in the body, one dies so many times. So many times, death. He said, you know how much, it's important for a Kshatriya to keep his self-esteem, Atmabhiman, Swabhiman. And if the Swabhiman is hurt, is put into challenge, so it's a death to the Kshatriya, to at least the revered people. He said, Yudhishthira being the king and your elder brother, the most respected person, so you kill him by insulting him. He has insulted your Gandiva, you scold him and kill him by insulting him. And this is where he brings a solution, that you kill him not by body, but he killed his self-esteem. So like this, we have all the dilemmas, many dilemmas, where Krishna gives an extension to the things. And these aspects are reflected in most of the later literature when we come to the classical period. So most of these, serious issues in the Mahabharata, in the Ramayana, in the Puranas, various occasions, the characters are taken and then they're analyzed, and their psychology is a proper analysis of the psychology of the characters and then presented in a very poetic way. So one more example we get from Bhasa. He says, Sukham artho bhavet datum, Sukham prana, Sukham tapa, Sukham anyad bhavet sarvam, Dukkham nyasasya rakshanam. Another practical example he brings. When what happens here, the situation here is that the queen has to live in secret with someone. So the minister of the king, so he takes the queen and goes to another person and says that at your home, so my sister, who is the queen, she has to live for 1 year. So you have to take care, and then after that you have to return. Not that you keep forever. So you have to return. So I'm leaving it for 1 year. Like I deposit some money in the bank as a fixed deposit. That deposit is called a nyasa. So here, whether the person will keep or not keep, will accept this or not accept this, is a challenge again. Because he says, everything brings happiness. Sukham artho bhavet datum. If someone gives, like you give some money to someone or help out someone in some manner, that is easy, sukham. Sukham prana, sukham tapa. It is easy to perform tapas. It is even easy to give up the prana for something, for the nation or for anything good. Sukham anyat bhavet sarvam. Everything is easy to do. Dukkham nyasasya rakshanam. So much of care has to be taken. Dukkham nyasasya rakshanam. To accept a challenge like this, that someone's wife you have to keep at home for 1 year with all the care, this is the most difficult thing that has come on the way. Then there is another thing about the destiny where Bhasa describes Kalakramena jagatah parivartamana chakrar panktiriva gacchate bhagya pankti. Why he brings out this when this whole situation of depositing or keeping the queen at home. So he says, why such a situation comes that the king and the queen, they have to face such challenges in their life. So there he explains that Kala Kramena Jagatah Parivartamana. This whole creation is called Jagat because it is mutable. It's always changing. So nothing is permanent here. Kala Kramena. So by the time everything changes, Parivartamana. How? He says the Bhagya Pankti, the human destiny or destiny of this world. Destiny of this world and whoever is a part of this world. Chakrara Panktiriva Gacchate. It is like the spokes in the wheel. So it keeps moving. So whoever is a part of this movement is bound to change. Today good, tomorrow bad. Again good, again bad. So Chakrara Panktiriva Gacchate Bhagya Pankti. So these are some of the practical examples from Bhasa. We come to the next poet who is famous, who was in fact not just a poet but a philosopher, a grammarian of very high cadre. His name is Bhartrihari. Bhartrihari was famous for two of his writings. One is he has written 3 centuries or 3 shatakas, 3 texts containing 100 verses each. One is a Shrangara Shataka. Shrangara Shataka means it's erotic in its nature, in its content. He describes eroticism throughout by 100 verses. The next comes the Niti Shatakam. Niti Shatakam means how to lead a right kind of life. See, if anyone wants, at a very practical level, at a very human level, one wants to lead a right kind of life, moral, ethical, righteous, dharmic life. So Bhartrihari offers, and Bhartrihari was one of the greatest psychologists. He could understand the psychology of everything, the human being, and then offers such kind of things. So Niti Shataka, and then he offers the 3rd century, 3rd Shataka is a Vairagya Shataka. Here the Vairagya is taken in its negative sense. The Vairagya means the world disgusting thing, because he himself was disgusted with the world. This is what he describes right in the beginning of his Niti Shataka, which is a beautiful verse. So he was very fond of, that's why he wrote this text on eroticism. He was so full of, erotic ideas and things, fond of women, so engaged in love affairs. So he got disgusted with this when he realized the futility of uselessness of these affairs. So there he writes a very beautiful poetry in the beginning of the Niti Shatakam. He says, Yam chintayami satatam maisa virakta. You know this, the most one novel which is written by Professor Manoj Das, who lives in Pondicherry. He is a great novelist, the Jnanpith awardee. He has written Amruta Phalam. In Odia, it is the nectarous fruit. So related to Bhartrhari's life. So there, someone once gave Bhartrhari, one sadhu, a fruit, which is supposed to be the Amruta Phalam. He says that as long as you carry this fruit, so you will not have hunger and thirst, and you will always keep experiencing the joy. So he thought, wow, such a beautiful gift. Let me give it to my wife whom I love so much. So he gave it to, he had many wives, so among, whoever was the most favorable or he was fond of, so he gave it to her. Now that wife was in love with another person, so she gave that fruit to that person. That person was in love with another lady, so he gave to that lady, and that lady was dying for Bhartrhari, so again the fruit came back to Bhartrhari. Okay, so this is how this whole story, he says, Yam chintayami satatam maisa virakta. So she is not liking me, and I keep on thinking about her only. She doesn't like me. Sa anya sakta. So she is interested in someone else. That someone is interested in someone else. Then he says, ultimately when he receives the fruit, that is the, time for his realization. He says, Dhik tamcha. So fie on that lady whom I love. Dhik tamcha. And fie on that person who is in love with that lady. Dhik madanamcha. And fie on love, and Dhik mamcha, and fie on me. So he gives up his kingdom, his world and everything, and then goes to the forest for his, further contemplation. And then there, at that point of time, when he is experiencing this disgust, he writes the Vairagya Shataka, that this world is full of, only Vairagya can save you, he says. Otherwise, you have bhoge, roga, bhayam. You want to enjoy, but there is the bhaya of roga. Such fine vada, crispy vada. But, you want to fill your soul with that, but roga, bhaya. 5 kha loon, to pata nahi kya hoga. But I want to eat, why 5, 25? I to felt like, okay, kam se kam 20-25 vada to hona chahiye. Bhoge, roga, bhayam. So this whole world is so, filled in with different kinds of bhayas. You want to earn more? Vitte chora bhayam. You want to earn more? But then there is this feeling of insecurity. Where to keep? It will go all the way. Then all kinds of bhayas he lists out, and then finally he says, Vairagyam eva bhayam. The only abhaya one experiences when one is detached, when one is not attached to all these things. So give up everything, no attachment. Vairagya. Vairagyam eva bhayam. Meva abhayam. Vairagyam eva bhayam. So these are the 3 texts where Bhartrhari offers, the excellent poetic quality of Bhartrhari one finds in these 3 poems, 300 poems, belonging to 3 different topics: Shrangara, Niti, and Vairagya. The eroticism and the right living and the Vairagya. The 6th century. He was supposed to be contemporary of Kalidas, Vikramaditya's brother. But there are again controversies about the dating. No, 1st to 12th century. So the actual decline happened after 12th century, after the destruction of Nalanda. That caused a great damage. It was a shock to the whole nation. So from 12th century onwards, we don't see that, like profuse creativity. It declines. But till 12th century, it was in every field, it was excellent. Name any branch of knowledge, you have some original contribution. So now this Bhartruhari, apart from his poetic quality, he is famous for another contribution, is known as Vakya Padiya. It is a grammatical, philosophical work. The philosophy of grammar, philosophy of language, philosophy of word, Vakya Padiya. So there he presents that Shabda Brahmani Nishnata Parabrahmadi Gacchati. So the Shabda Brahma, one who engages oneself in the matter of word and sense. So he offers one, think like most of the times we say, oh, how can Vyakarana give me moksha? How can poetry give me moksha? But he says, Shabda Brahmani Nishnata Parabrahmadi Gacchati. So one who is deeply contemplated on the sound and sense and their relationship and their eternality. So this Shabda Brahma leads towards the attainment of Parabrahma. So that is the philosophy he is offering. In the text, he explains there what is the philosophy of word, what is the philosophy of the sentences, what is the philosophy of this whole affair of language. So the deeper philosophy of language is thoroughly outlined by Bhartruhari. Then afterwards there are many other philosophical texts dealing with the philosophy of language, but Bhartruhari is the most prominent contributor in that field. So now Bhartruhari, as he is famous in the field of philosophy, in the realm of philosophy for offering a deeper philosophy of the language, so in the realm of poetry, he is famous for these three shatakas, where even though Kalidasa has written so many dramas and so many poems, big poems, but by just writing these 300 verses, Bhartruhari could get the status equal to Kalidas. So that is what is the power of his writing, the power of his style, the power of his language. So the Niti Shatakam offers the most, the real soul of Bhartruhari comes out in Niti Shatakam, where 126 verses are available in Niti Shatakam. Unfortunately, Sri Aurobindo has completely translated Bhartruhari's Niti Shatakam into English poetry. Poetic translation of Bhartruhari's Niti Shatakam. Beautiful rendition. And very powerful rendition. Almost, like if one wants to understand Bhartruhari, through this, read Sri Aurobindo's translation. He brings out the spirit of Bhartruhari in his translation. So most of the times people complain, oh, why Sri Aurobindo has not translated this? These words are not there in the original Sanskrit. But it is a completely different way of translating. He says it doesn't matter whether these words are existing but that is the bhava. That is what he wants to bring out. So he brings out the spirit, the soul of the poet by being in union with the spirit of the poet, the spirit of the poetry, and then he translates. So these are more like transcreations than translation. So he said that the translation from Sanskrit to any European language is an impossibility. Because he says there is so much of gap between the values, the core values of these two languages. So it is an impossibility. So what someone can do is one can just read and interpret it in other languages, in European languages. But any attempt towards translating it literally will be disastrous. Because it's very true also. Like when he comes to, like Kalidas becomes more lively through Sri Aurobindo's translation. Because it's not translation, it's interpretation. He's bringing out, I'll give you one example. The Meghadutam of Kalidas was entirely translated by Sri Aurobindo. Entirely. All the 120 verses of Meghadutam. Now, unfortunately, his translation was buried under the earth because of the, like police used to gather all his documents, all his writings. So when they recovered it, it was all eaten up by the termites, by the white ants. So what was recovered was some fragments of one or two verses which they could decipher from the manuscript. So this is what is available. Even from those few fragments, we know like how he translated the text. Now, when he took up the translation of Meghadutam, there in the whole world, in the field of English poetry, there was this a particular meter called Tarza Rima, Terzarima. This is a meter in English. So most of the top level poets of that time, they had banned this meter, saying that this particular meter cannot be naturalized in English. So no one should write poetry using this meter. So Sri Aurobindo took it as a challenge. He said, no, even it can be naturalized in English. So he not only said this, but he took this risk of translating entire Meghadutam using Tarjarima meter. He said it has a very close affinity with the Mandakranta meter in Sanskrit. And he translated. And some of the translations, when we see, I'll give you one example, like why it is impossible to translate from Sanskrit to any other European language, and how we can do justice, yet translation is needed. How do we translate and what to translate? Just one example, the story of Meghadutam is, there is a supernatural being called a Yaksha. He was guarding the lotus pond of Kubera. And Kubera had made a sankalpa to offer 1001 lotus flowers to Shiva next day. So he told this Yaksha that you guard, you be careful, attentive, so then no flower is disturbed by any, like any animal or anything. So tomorrow I get in the morning 1000 flowers. So this Yaksha was a freshly married person, and he is giving night duty here, and he was engrossed completely with the thought of his newly married wife. So he didn't know what was happening. He was so engrossed in that. In between, one elephant had entered and disturbed the whole pond, and the Kubera didn't get any flower next day. So he cursed that for what reason you were inattentive, so you remained separated from your newly married wife for 1 year. Then he took out all his supernatural powers, because the Yakshas, the supernatural beings, they can become invisible, they can take any size and then visit. So he took all his supernatural powers, so then he cannot utilize his powers. So he was living in Ramtek. So Ramtek is the mountain there in Nagpur. So that was the place, because when we look at the geography which is offered, the route offered, the movement of the cloud from that place to Ujjain, it is decided that that was the place where Yaksha was living, and Yaksha's wife was living in Alkapuri, which is in Ujjain. Now when the monsoon comes, he looks at the fresh clouds, he becomes very emotional and considers the cloud as a living being and sends the message to his wife, describing his own condition. He says, "Cloud, when you go to Alkapuri, you meet my wife, you describe my condition to her." So this is the content of Meghadutam. And there he says at one place that when you go, you will find my wife Chakravakiva Vadhum. Vadhu means my wife, my thing. You will find her like very mournful, very dukhi, sorrowful, like a Chakravaki. Now what is Chakravaki? He is the giving, because Kalidas is famous for similes. Upama Kalidasasya. So you will find her like a Chakravaki. Now what is Chakravaki? How does one translate this? So Chakravaka is a particular bird, kind of bird. They live on the riverbed. Biologically, the couples remain together during the daytime, very close to each other. They don't want to leave each other. Okay, so that is why the Chakravakas are taken as symbol of lust, kama, intense kama. And when night comes, so they remain separated from each other. When it is the time for union, so they remain separated and they feel the separation, pang of separation, and they cry. Very painfully they cry. The sound. This is why it is called the Chakravaka Ruta. Ruta means the crying. Very painful cry of these things because they feel the pang of separation. So he says, you will find my wife like a Chakravaki. Now how does one translate this? If you put the equivalent, it is not going to bring out the emotion. Or if you put this word itself, it's not going to offer the solution. An European mind, a mind which is not familiar with this story behind Chakravaka, will gather nothing. You'll say, what nonsense? You'll find my wife like a bird. And Sri Aurobindo translates it, brings out this emotion, this painful, this intense emotion by saying that soul, S-O-L-E, soul like a bird, soul like a widowed bird. He uses the word bird, widowed bird. Widowed means one who is separated from the consort. Soul like alone, like a widowed bird, when all are making their nests, when all others are making their nests, happy at home, you will find my wife like a widowed bird. So he doesn't translate Chakravaki, but he says what is the emotion behind. This is the art of translation. This is how, Sri Aurobindo has brought out the spirit of Bhartruhari, brought out the spirit of Kalidas by going deep into the emotion, what exactly has to be translated. It's interpretation. It's not, that is why he says, no, it's not translation. One has to interpret it. But then another thing he says that the poetry can be best expressed through poetry. The poetry can be best expressed through poetry. In the sense that if you want to translate something or interpret something like a poetry, you want to interpret using other language, again interpret it using the poetry. It has to be poetic rendering, not a prose rendering. Then the poetic value can be retained, right? Not translating. Yes. So that is why he says that the translation, the job of the translator, the interpreter, is not to translate the word, but the force behind, the emotion behind it, the spirit behind it, the soul behind it. So we come to Bhartruhari. He begins his Niti Shatakam with a profound realization. He says, Dik Kala Dhyanavad Chinnananta Chinnamatra Murtaye Swanubhuti Kamanaya Namah Santaya Tejase. He offers his salutation. This is again the Vedantic realization which he offers. It was his realization of the Supreme Reality as Namah Santaya Tejase. The image that he offers, that salutation to that deep, unflickering flame, pure flame, Santaya Tejase. And it is a matter of Swanubhuti. It cannot be described. It is a matter of self-realization, or one has to reflect or see the reflection of that within oneself. Swanubhuti Kamanaya. It can be measured only by experiencing it, realizing it. And what is it? Dik Kala Adi Anavachinna. Dik Kala Dhyanavachinna Ananta Chinnamatra Murtaye. And that flame is, he is imaging it like Ananta. It is infinite, vast. Chinnamatra is the pure consciousness. It is in the form of pure consciousness, the pure flame, Ananta, infinite, and not divided by dik, not affected by the dik, kala, time and space, is beyond the time and space. Dik kala dhyanavachanna ananta janamatra murtaye swanubhuti kamanaya namah santaya tejase. To that pure consciousness, pure flame is my salutation. So I open myself to that flame. So with this prayer, he begins his Niti Shatakam. There he deals with every human emotion and every psychological problem and every moral, ethical values which can uplift the humanity, uplift the human being. So the Dik, Kala, Adi, Anavachinna, one who is not separated by Dik and Kala, etc., who is beyond the time and space. I want to write Santaya Tejase. So here Dik is the space, Kala, time, Dik, Kala, Adi. Adi means all other things, part of the Dik and Kala. Anavachinna, he cannot be separated or measured by this. One cannot know him by time, by space, by anything. The only measure is the Swanubhuti, the self-realization. One has to see it, reflect it within oneself to measure him what it is. And what it is he offers that Shanta Tejas Ananta Chinmatra Murti, that pure flame of pure consciousness which is vast, which is simply vast. So we'll take just one example from Bhartrihari. I'll give you some more examples from Bhartrihari when we come back from the tea break. So one very popular a poem from Niti Shatakam. He says, Sahitya, Sangeeta, Kala Vihina, Sakshat Pashu, Puchha Vishana Hina, Trunanna Khadannapi Jivamana, Tad Bhagadheyam Paramam Pashuna. And there is always a subtle humor, sense of humor one gets from Bhartrihari. He presents those things in that manner. So then one is not affected. When he speaks the very crude truth, this is what is the truth. So he speaks it in a very subtle, adding certain humor. So he says the man who is not inclined towards Sahitya, poetry, literature, he has no interest in all these things. Sangeeta, music, one who is dead to music, one who is dead to literature, poetry, and Kala, any kind of fine arts. So to poetry, to music, to art, who is dead, whose ears and eyes are closed, Sahitya Sangeeta Kala Bihina, he said he indeed is a man, but a man animal, Pashu, Sakshat Pashu. He is Pashu, animal. The only difference is that he doesn't have the horns and the tail. Puchha, Vishana, Hina. It's Pashu. Only those two things are missing. Otherwise he is equal to animal. He is the animal without this. But then there is one more great thing. He says, he brings out the utter selfishness of these human beings. He said, this human being is so selfish. He thinks only about himself. But in this case, this animal, it's an extremely good thing that he doesn't eat grass. Trunanna khadan api jivamana. He says he lives without grass. And this very fact is the supreme destiny, supreme fortune. It's a good fortune for all other animals. Tad bhagadheyam paramam pashunam. Imagine if the human being was eating grass, not a single animal would have got grass, have been deprived. So tad bhagadheyam paramam pashunam. So through this, imagine he brings out like a human being, if he has to live a life of human being, life of a man. So where he has to put his interest and the selfishness of the humanity and his pashutva steps. So one has to recover this pashutva and rise to the man-human level. taking interest in Sahitya, Sangita, Kala. So this someone says that by the music, if someone is not, like someone's consciousness is not affected by this, so he is a Pashu, or he will be some, someone who is deeply engrossed in that, that Supreme Brahman, and he is completely lost to that reality and doesn't know the reality of this world. Either Pashu or that. These two. So choose what you want to remain Pashu or remain that. But at least if you cannot be both, cannot attain to the highest level, come raise yourself to the man-human level. Take little interest in Sahitya, Sangita, Kala. Go and attend some workshops, retreat, and Mukteshwar and this ashram. Nainital, Madhuban, Bhimtal. Okay, so we take a break.